Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Willy Daunic of 102.5 The Game. Of course, he's the Predators play-by-play man for television and a former basketball and baseball player at Vanderbilt. Our podcast, presented by Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center. Wellspire offers personal and professional development opportunities in a beautiful facility in the Gulch neighborhood. Stop by for an event with world-renowned speakers or host an off-site event that will wow your team or your clients. We also thank our co-sponsor, the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water and has a mission to bring clean water to the world. Today's news sponsored by Sutherland and Belk, an SEC sports-loving injury firm in Nashville. These guys will shoot you straight on your rights and options when you've been injured in an accident. Call them at 615-846-6200 to get your questions answered. You can also visit them online at sbinjurylaw.com. Vanderbilt has a baseball scrimmage with Michigan this Sunday at Hawkins Field. Gates open at 10 Central. First pitch is at noon. This is, of course, the David Williams Fall Classic, as they have named it. And the first 300 fans to show up get a Vanderbilt mini desk helmet, while all fans in attendance will get a T-shirt. The guest line, presented by our friends at Boll & Branch, started by Scott and Missy Tannen. They are Vanderbilt graduates. I've slept on Boll & Branch sheets for years, and I would not trade them for anything. I had no clue how comfortable sheets were until I got these. They are also fair trade certified, which means they are made under safe conditions by men and women, treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You can return them for free, but trust me, you will not want to. Once you get those, try the mattress. That was voted the best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That is spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code Vandy and get $50 off your first set of sheets. Willy Daunic joins us now. I really appreciate you joining us between trips all over the western and northern United States, or North America, I guess is a better way to put it, with hockey. Hope you're doing well. How are things?
Things are well, and you're right. This is one of those crazy road trips that the Predators are on. They played a lot of home games earlier in the season. 10 of the first 14 were at home. They started a road trip in Detroit in the Eastern time zone, and now there are 3 more games on this road trip, starting in Denver on Thursday. Then they go out to San Jose on Saturday, and then go up to Vancouver to round out the road trip. So 2 different countries, 3 different time zones, none of them in the central time zone. So this is a weird one.
Do you get to keep your frequent flyer miles?
Well, normally I travel with the team, which keeps you sane. Like I think I would go off the deep end if it was all commercial travel. And there are a couple teams that do not allow their announcers to fly with them. It's kind of an old school mentality. Those are few. They're very, very few now. But one in particular, whoever Lou Lamoriello is running, and right now it's the New York Islanders, who are a very good team. But the bad thing for their announcers is they are on their own. So I think that would be nuts. The frequent flyer miles would be nice, but I think just the practicality of chartering just makes up for it.
Let's get into Vanderbilt basketball for a bit before we go to the mailbag. I know you didn't get a chance to see the game live, but you saw some highlights. You saw Jerry Stackhouse's press conference. What has stood out to you? And by the way, we are doing this on Wednesday afternoon. I will literally be leaving my home office to go to Vanderbilt in a couple hours. So by the time this airs, Vanderbilt will have played a game already. But just from the preseason perspective, what have you thought?
Yeah, I was curious. The highlights, you see a lot of dunks, and of course that's what you're going to see a lot when you're playing, the team that they were playing in the exhibition. So we've got so much left to learn about this crew. I was much more interested in the post-game press conference with Coach Stackhouse, his presence, and I thought there were some really good questions. It was a long press conference, and I think for the first time, at least for me, I got the best sort of outlook and insight from him that I had seen. I thought it was very noteworthy that it seems like a lot of what he's trying to do from a foundation basis is on defense, is try to establish good habits on defense, that playing time is going to be based on defense. In fact, I think he even said the starting lineup, and I don't know if he held it as a hard, fast rule, but he basically said, I'm really that is going to earn starting time. And I think that's a pretty sound foundation, because if you take a look at some of the things that had them crater last year, I do think habits on defense, and I'm talking about not just physically not able to guard the person you're guarding, but also just not putting yourself in the wrong position, making a simple mistake, guarding a screen or turning your head and allowing your guy to cut to the basket uncontested. If he can build those habits, I think you could see a lot of improvement. And if you're trying to find ways of how do you get more out of this group than the last coaching staff did, I think that's a great place to start.
We had an interesting media session with him on Tuesday, and I asked him, or someone asked him about defense. He said, I was happy with about 40% of our possessions. I feel like we got about 40% of them right. This is paraphrasing and going from memory. And I followed up. I said, well, you did get, I think, 17 steals and you forced 28 turnovers. So that is an indication of effort, right? And he didn't say that it wasn't, but he kind of laughed and said, well, he said something like, we guessed right a few of the times. Like we went for a steal and we got it, basically. I thought that was an interesting take. He's not blistering his kids by any stretch, and I think he's acknowledging there was effort, but he's very matter-of-fact about, I'm pleased with some things, but this is where we are and this is where we want to be, and his ability to quantify that was interesting.
Yeah, I think he knows that they're up against it. They're obviously gonna face teams that it's going to be tougher to get that type of turnover ratio and steal ratio. But to me, it's more of a mentality. And also, I'm very curious to see how he's teaching defense in terms of some of those things that a coach might have a choice. How do they want to play defense? It could be something as simple as how much zone do you want to play as opposed to man. Now, Jerry Stackhouse comes from a pro background where, the zone defense is a relatively new thing. When he started playing in the NBA, he couldn't play zone defense. But going back to his days under Dean Smith playing, one of the things of a Dean Smith system, and I know a lot about it because Eddie Fogler played for Dean Smith before he became the coach at Vanderbilt, coached under Dean Smith for a long, long time, is mixing defenses and showing teams different looks was a big part of how they went about it. So I want to see how they do it from that standpoint, but also how are they teaching their players to guard screens? How do they guard the pick and roll? There's different ways of going about it. And so whatever you do, you want to teach it well and have everybody know exactly what's supposed to be done based on how the team is attacking you. So we're talking about foundational things that I think we're all curious to see how Coach Stack goes about it.
What else stood out to you either from highlights or the box score or press conference comments?
Well, one of the things that I think will be important is what kind of mileage can he get out of Scottie Pippen Jr. if that's who he would like to be the point guard. And I think it was it was an accurate thing to say last year that once Darius Garland got hurt, they had a lot of issues with who they wanted to run the point. And Saban Lee, I think, is a very good talent. He's got some huge strengths as a player, but he's probably not a pure point guard. He can play point guard, but I think it would help a lot slot people in the right space if Scottie Pippen can be the point guard. But that's an awful lot to ask of a freshman. And so how much can he handle? I think I heard Coach Stackhouse say that some of the sets and some of the stuff, for lack of a better term, offensively, they hadn't put a high percentage in. And maybe that's because you've got a freshman who is basically the quarterback, and you want to do that in incremental steps. And again, I think sound reasoning, but you've got. So I'm curious, how do you make the best of that situation? Would you agree, Chris, that how Pippen plays is going to tell us a lot of how this team does?
Yeah, I think anytime you run a freshman point guard out there, unless it's a Darius Garland, you're going to have some issues probably. But one thing you said was about maybe not putting in some of the sets. I don't know if I'm thinking in my head of the same comment that you referenced. No, he said that they weren't going to show as much against Clark. In
Yeah,
other words, there are going
he
to be
did
some
say that.
things, yeah, that they're going to. Now, he may have said that they have not installed all their sets, too. So it may be two layers there. But, when I kind of look at that, that's what I remember him saying. Well, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's my
No, but
thoughts.
no, it's a good point. He also he did make the point. He didn't want to show other teams. He said the film does get around, and we didn't want to just play our whole hand out in the exhibition game. We wanted to save a few things. But I think I got the impression that both were true.
Yeah, and the Saban Lee thing is the one thing that I think is the most polarizing issue as fans look at the team. There's a lot of people that say, well, that's dumb. He's one of their best players. If he's not putting him on the floor to start the game, he's not a very good coach. I don't know that I agree with that. In fact, I don't think that I do. And here's why. You've got to get through 200 minutes in a game. You got to get five guys 40 minutes. And sometimes, especially on a team that is offensively limited, boy, you got your best five on the floor to start the game, and you're going to sub out for two or three guys maybe 5 minutes in. If you're not a deep offensive team, that means you may have two or three black holes offensively. I could see where bringing Saban Lee off the bench, A, it may be a motivational tool to get him to play better defense, but B, it could also be a thing where, let's say you got to take Neesmith or whoever is Neesmith probably wouldn't come off the floor the first time, but let's say you got to take your second or third leading scorer off the floor, maybe both, whoever those guys end up being outside of Saban Lee. I think that might give you some scoring and some skill balance just by bringing him off the bench. And by the way, he did lead the team in scoring the other night, and Jerry Stackhouse says he may lead us in minutes too.
Another thing that he said is, and this made sense to me because I heard this from Coach Fogler, and so you can maybe sense far in the past a Dean Smith reference there, and that is it's not as important who starts the game, but who's on the floor at the end of the game. And so that makes sense. I do think, too, that there is something to be said for rewarding your best players by starting them. But I thought it was an interesting thing. Like, you can tell that he revealed an NBA mindset with a 40-minute game, the benefits of having somebody come off the bench. He says NBA scouts also, and sort of planting the seed for, hey, this is a place where if you want to play NBA basketball, you're going to have a coach that has that mindset. What works in the NBA? He said NBA scouts like to see who can come off the bench and provide a spark, jump in there and give your team a lift. That's a skill that they're looking for in the NBA. So a lot of, like you use the term layers, I think there are layers to what he's saying there. But I would hope, too, that regardless, you got to get the most out of Saban Lee, right? You have to have huge production for him if you want to have any kind of bounce-back season.
Yeah, and another thing that he says frequently, he stresses this idea of the NBA is a roster. You have a use for guys 6 to 13 or whatever it is. I don't know
Right.
the numbers, and the numbers he uses changes over time, but the point he's making is, look, you may think you're going to go to the NBA, and maybe some of you kids on this team are going to go to the NBA, but if you go, you might start 8th or ninth guy in the rotation at best, which means you got to learn your role and progress from there. I think that's the carrot he's kind of hanging out to his kids, is saying, look, some of you may be able to play pro ball, but part of that is learning that you've got to fit a role, and it's not just coming in being a superstar.
Well, think about Luke Cornett and Damian Jones, right? Those two guys are trying to carve out their role in the NBA, and probably neither one of them are going to be all-stars. They were tremendous college players, but they're trying to carve out an identity that has them playing in the league for a long time. And they both hopefully are on track to do that with Luke Cornett playing for Chicago and now Damian Jones getting a chance in Atlanta. So I think that's a really sound way of thinking. Like, for the most part, most guys aren't going to go from college and play in the NBA to start with. But those that do, you're much more likely to be a role player than you are a superstar.
Willie, you are in an airport. You're going to be hitting the air here in a little bit, that not the airwaves, but the physical air to travel. And we said we'd try to do this in about 20 minutes. I've got some mailbag questions, and for the sake of time, I'm going ahead to those. Our mailbag is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton, an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood. If you're looking for a one-stop shop to take care of your insurance needs, Josh has you covered. Call him at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Twitter at Joshua Minton HQ or at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Give him a try. Tell him you heard about it here. Crime says the football season has been such a disaster that I'm tired of hearing about it. What thoughts do you have about the new basketball season and or the upcoming basketball signing period? Now, we mostly talked about the season. I imagine you exhausted a lot of your thoughts there, but any leftovers that you didn't get to, and maybe any thoughts on the signing period?
Well, you would know better than me on the signing period. I know it's such an important part of what you're doing, and you're trying to build an identity. If you're Jerry Stackhouse, a brand new one that is going to look attractive to the top players. My thought has always been, with him coming from a very outside the box background in terms of what Vanderbilt has done before, i.e. a guy that's been a pro coach for such a long time, is how does he make his vision fit with what works at Vanderbilt? You know, kids that want to be in school at a place like Vanderbilt, how to use that as a strength, as well as identify guys who are going to help you win games. I think that's the biggest thing. We'll see how he's able to do that because he's coming at it from the outside. No question about it. The only other thing that I would say is I'm really curious. Sometimes you get this is my general outlook on the season. New coaches, new set of eyes on these same players who have to be broken a little bit in terms of confidence, in terms of morale from last year. So how does he get out of the gate with a fresh start here? We've talked about the non-conference schedule is not nearly as intimidating. They have a chance maybe to win some games and build some confidence. But what does a guy like Obina look like now? A couple years removed from being on the court, been away from it a long time. He struggled the other night, but he's got an NBA body. You know, he's a guy that's got some tools. What can they get out of those? It's a total wild card. And then guys like Cleveland Brown, who have been in the program for a long time. And, you know, all of those guys. I'm just really curious who flourishes with the new coaches and who doesn't, take a step forward. You just hope that every player in the program that's coming back can get a little bit better. But it's a different spin when you have a new coach, new system.
Dorking wants to know your expectations for the basketball season. That's a tough one to answer, but give it a whirl there.
Well, they should win more games because of the non-conference schedule. They should. Their one-loss record ought to look a little bit better, I would hope. Not that they're going to win every game in the non-conference, but they should win a higher percentage because the strength of schedule should be lower, just without going through team by team. And I think the real question would be, can they have some success in the league in terms of just building the confidence and the foundation that, okay, it's a big step in the right direction because there's nowhere to go but up. So they're going to lose some games. So how do they look when they lose? I think you can lose, and let's throw out a record of 5-13 in the conference, just for argument's sake. Hopefully it's more than that. But the 5-13 could be, hey, they are a tough out. In the SEC tournament, they could be a thorn in somebody's side in that first round. Or is it like last year where you are really glad to see Vanderbilt coming into town late in the year because they got nothing going. They haven't found a formula that they can win. And when the time gets tough, they won't be able to do the things that you have to do to win. In fact, on some nights they might even hand you the game. That was all too often the case last year, particularly down the stretch when it was really time for the teams to separate. The good teams get better as the season goes along. I think that's what I'm looking for is, can this team look way better at the end of the season than they do at the beginning of the season?
Here's another one from Door King, and boy, bonus points to you if you can figure this one out. He says the same question for women's bowling, and should we be concerned that reformulated nacho cheese will affect our grip this year? I don't have a clue what that means. I tried to research that to have a clue. Somewhere there's some engineer at Google going, why are people searching nacho cheese bowling? But if you understand what that's getting at, then you win Guest of the Year on this show.
Well, I can only speculate because I don't know for a fact, but it sounds to me like I need to start eating some nacho cheese or something the next time I go bowling. Will that help me add a few strikes to my game?
I have no idea, but if that's the case, I need to eat a lot of that.
Oh yeah, I think we need to start consulting with some of the bowling. I mean, what they've been doing is pretty good for Vanderbilt, so maybe we need to just ask them and ask what the deal is.
Yeah, John Williamson, I've had him on the podcast before. That's a fascinating story, and he learned a lot of what has made him successful by watching Tim Corbin.
but not, you're saying not by ordering nachos necessarily.
Not as far as I know. I would have to ask John to confirm, but I've done this 5 years. I'm pretty sure that takes the cake. Using a food analogy is the most random question I've ever gotten. So if you have nightmares about Doritos chasing you or something, then you can blame it on me.
Yeah, I will blame it on the podcast.
Well, Willie, I'm going to let you go in a minute so you can get on your way with your travels. But I've got to say, I'm going to take credit for the Predators' win over Detroit the other night. I was watching kids and watched the first period, and it was 1-0 when I had to go, and come back later, and I look up, and it's 5-1. I'm like, did I see that right? And I tweeted in the meantime when it was 1-0, what is it with this Red Wings hold over the Predators? So I guess that's what it took to get them going.
Yeah, the cream finally rose to the top. The Red Wings, for those that don't follow closely, had beaten it. They've gone on hard times. The Red Wings have won 11 Stanley Cups, and they've won 4 since the Predators have been in the league, and that's more than anybody in the NHL during that time span. We're talking about 20-something years, but they have gone through a rebuilding. But despite going down a notch and the Predators being in a really high window of success, they had beaten the Predators 10 out of 11, which was a real head scratcher. But they finally broke loose, and they did what they have shown the ability to do early in the year, and that's be very explosive offensively. And that's a really good sign. Not every team has the ability to score goals in bunches like the Predators have shown. Hopefully they can keep that up. You're not going to score 4 goals or more every night, but if you have the ability to do that on any given night, over the long haul, that's going to help you win games.
You guys had a strange week because since we talked, you lose, I think, to the Rangers 2-1 on Saturday. I caught a little bit of that. That's like the one time all year you guys, I guess, weren't on it offensively at all. And then the game before that, I think, was a Halloween night game where I was worn out. I went to bed. I watched, I think, the whole first 2 periods. You guys are winning comfortably. You dominated the first period in a way that I've rarely seen a team dominate a period with all the shots and everything. And I wake up and you lost the game, and I couldn't believe it. It ruined my morning.
Oh yeah, that was a hiccup. They were up 4-1 at the end of the second period and had everything seemingly in control. But it's just like any sport. If you take your foot off the gas, or all of a sudden you leave a little something there, the other team makes a play. Sometimes it's hard to get it turned back around. And Calgary, give them a lot of credit. They went wild in the third period and won an incredible game, 6-5. But yeah, I don't know if there was a hangover from that at all against the Rangers, but I do know this. You know, if you take a look, they've been in every game. They've shown the ability to blow teams away. They have lost some close games. But so all in all, in the big picture, I like what I'm seeing from the Predators here. But there's still a long, long way to go, and this road trip will be another one that shows us some stuff. The first matchup with the Avalanche, a team that a lot of people think have very high expectations this year. That's coming up on Thursday.
Well, it's kind of ridiculous to say this in early November, but from what I've seen of the Preds, I've maybe got to watch a third of their games. that to me, when I have seen them, looks like a team that's good enough to win it all.
I think that's how they see themselves, for sure. You need a little luck with health, and as we found out last year, it's really all about peaking and being, but you also have to get there. So far, they're checking the boxes. The trading PK Subban, bringing in Matt Duchene, so far is doing what they hoped it would do, and that is, bring a little more offense to the table without sacrificing too much defense. It's tough to lose Subban, but so far they've been able to manage that to this point, and still look pretty good in that area. I think they've come out ahead, at least to this point.
Willie, thanks for joining us. Tell people where they can find your show at 102.5 The Game and anything else you'd like to advertise.
All right. 102.5 The Game, of course, ESPN Radio here in Nashville, 10 to 2 on weekdays with Darren McFarland, Chase McCabe. Mitch Light joins us every week. Coach Mason joins us every week. So we've got a lot of good things going for Vanderbilt fans. Of course, we're the Predators flagship, so we talk a lot of hockey if that's what you're into, and still we feel like we've got great football coverage. Predators' next broadcast, as I mentioned, is Thursday night in Colorado and then Saturday in San Jose. So looking forward to that, and you can find me on Twitter at Willy D1025. That's Willy D1025.
Thank you, Willie. He is Willy Daunic. I'm Chris Lee, the host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. We appreciate you listening. We'll have one more episode we will drop on Friday.